Meredith and I, years ago, we wrote this article about Sweden because Sweden loves their taxing authority. They love the part of their government that's involved in their life from birth to death. And so there's something about it they've done really well, maybe because they're a homogenous society. I don't know. But we have this very anti-tax
We do.
culture in America. And I'm like, but you have roads and schools and fire departments and police and people
Yeah.
taking care of science and airports. I mean, that all took tax dollars. Like it didn't get built out. People were going on their wagons and riding horses just a little while ago.
Yeah.
So that all came from people coming together.
Yeah. I have an interesting story about that. Back when I was doing tax work, I had a new client, they came into the country. They were Canadians. They came into the country. And so they were living here full time. And so they had to file a tax return. So I did their tax return for him and I told them, and he was a contractor. So he had to pay Social Security tax and income tax. And they had not been paying at all, right? He was a 1099 subcontractor. And so I prepared the tax return for him. I'm like all stressed out because like they owed just a ton of money, right? In my mind, they owed a ton of money income because there was no planning. There was no planning on the upfront. It was like they walked in my office, they said, do this tax return for me. And I'm like, oh, where are you from? They're like, oh, we're Canadian. And I'm like, oh, cool. Okay. So we did the tax return. I handed them the bill and they go, that's all we owe. And so it was a husband and wife that were sitting in front of my desk. And I'm like, really? I thought that was horrible. And they're like, oh my gosh, no. In Canada, we give minimum 50% of our income back to taxes. And he's like, we think nothing of it. And you all complain about, how much it costs you in income tax. And even if you have Social Security and Medicare tax to that, you're not giving 50%, and your state tax, you're not giving 50% for most people, right? So I thought that was a really interesting, like, eye opener. Like, it's a U.S. problem, right? It's like our kind of thought process about our taxing system and how everybody feels like they get taxed all the way around. And in all actuality, most countries are much worse than ours.
They're much worse. And I feel like I wish people would appreciate that. I always try to give from a perspective of appreciation. I mean, certainly we advocate on behalf of taxpayers, but we also recognize that they haven't complied. So we've got to, say with governments like, hey, give these guys a little grace so that we can get them in compliance because they do want to do the right thing. They just didn't know. So, but you can only plead the fifth so long.
Right. And the acknowledgement that government is a business, right? So if you're running a business, which the government should be running a business, you have to be able to make money in order to do things like you said, nice roads, clean cities, like all those things that take a lot of money, people's time and infrastructure to do. So somebody has to pay for it.
Right.
But also, I don't want to pay any more than my share. So that's like my whole deal. Like I'm happy to pay, but I feel like everybody needs to actually pony up some money as well.
But it actually, I feel it works out from my experience, big four to regional to small. I'm like the big firms, the big companies bear the brunt of the tax obligations and small companies get away with murder, which is why the Wayfair decision did even the playing field. And there's no reason that decision needed to go forward. Wayfair could have given a rip about South Dakota. They did it out of the goodness of their hearts because they were very wealthy individuals that started that company. And they and Newegg and Overstock.com all came together, paid the legal fees to have that fight on behalf of taxpayers. And I think you have come some young tech entrepreneurs who are open to this process as they've learned to deal with America, right? Okay, if I've got to do it because I've made myself a big name, I'm going to get sued, get audited. I'm not going to settle. I'm going to let it go forward. And that's how that decision came forward because it was 100% a planned thing. It was not, it did not need to go to the Supreme Court. It was a contrived procedure. And the fastest way to go to the Supreme Court was to go through South Dakota. But it did even the playing field to some degree from a regulatory
things. Yeah. Definitely changed things. And I think, to some degree made things a lot more complicated or maybe maybe,
way complicated. I've never seen states act that quickly in my whole flipping life. I've been doing this almost 30 years. I've never seen every state get on board within 3 years. Every state has a Wayfair law now. They all are varied, but they all have one. You just do not see that kind of conformity ever. But they're like, there's a huge amount of money not coming to my front door because it's coming to I'm getting packages delivered to my front door now. And so I'm going to even it. And the other thing, the cost of doing business is slower now because of tech and people are open for business everywhere, including myself. I don't just have Colorado clients. We have clients all over the world. We can help anybody because we have tech. We can talk to
Right.
you like we're doing now. We don't have barriers to entry by having someone drive up to our office. So, and even though we have offices, we work remotely because why go in if we don't need to? So it's really changed the dynamic of our ability to help one another and with tech.